Hello, y'all. We are ready to do Chapter 8, which is Plant Injuries, Control, and Integrated Pest Management. Basically, when the plants are getting sick, what do we need to do? Plant Disease Basic is 8.1, and 8.2 is Plant Pests and Diseases. So there will be a little bit of overlap between 1 and 2, not much. And in Section 2, we're going to bring in weeds and bugs. So Section 1 is basically plant diseases, and 2 is weeds and bugs. I think that'll work just fine. All right, I think we're ready to go. All right, so plant disease basics. Taking a look at this diagram, this is called the plant disease triangle. I'm going to talk about it in just a little while. I'm going to go some details in that for you. Again, so the first objective, we are going to talk about this disease triangle. Then we're going to talk about the difference between biotic and abiotic diseases. Do you remember from biology, living and non-living? Biotic and abiotic diseases, so we'll talk about the difference in those. And then we're going to list the stages of the disease cycle, and there are 6 steps, stages, steps, stages, step stages. There's 6 of them, so we're going to go over that. This is your set of 2 videos for Section 1, and there'll be 2 more videos for Section 2, 4 altogether, 15 facts from each. This first one is a plant biology chapter talking about how we get our diseases and the defenses the plants have for it. And this is common household diseases and how to treat them. I know that a lot of you guys aren't necessarily agricultural based. You may not grow on a farm, but a lot of you guys, once we learn how to do these plants, you may want to have several plants in your home. These are houseplant diseases and how to treat them. Sorry, my mouse did something a little bit weird. Just checking. All right, so our introduction here. The plant diseases, any disease is an abnormal condition that's going to harm the plants, reducing their productivity. Again, if you're thinking agriculture, we're thinking how much corn or how much wheat you're going to be able to make. So it's going to reduce their productivity. These diseases have diverse causes and they require specific conditions to develop. The disease can't even develop if you don't have the right conditions. So if you keep it out of the right conditions, you won't get any diseases. And so understanding these plant diseases is going to be crucial for effective prevention and protection. All right, so first, this disease triangle, like we saw at the beginning, there's some pictures I'm going to go over with you on the next slide. So that disease triangle that we saw at the beginning is a concept that states that plant diseases development requires 3 interacting factors. Sorry, my mouse is just all over the place. Let me see if I can get that. There we go. That's a little better. 3 interacting factors. You saw that there were 3 circles in that Venn diagram. Okay, you have to have a susceptible host. You have to have a virulent. Virulent means strong and healthy. Okay, you have to have a virulent pathogen. That means a nice tough pathogen. And then you have to have a favorite environment for the pathogen to live. All right, which is probably not a favorable environment for your plant. So these are the 3 things you have to have. And again, I'm going to go over that on the next slide as well. The severity of the disease is going to depend on the degree of interaction between these factors. And I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to describe it again when I have the picture because I think so much better with pictures. Okay, so the severity of the disease, how strong the disease is, how bad it is, whether or not it's going to kill your plant. The severity of the disease is going to depend on the degree of interaction between these 3 factors. And the variations within the factor, like the host, genetic diversity, pathogen life cycle, environment, microclimates, all of those are going to change the incident and severity. So there's a lot of factors that's going to determine how severe this disease is depending on how the 3 parts interact. If any of the 3 components is absent, the disease will not occur. And again, we're trying to not make diseases happen. So if you have to have a susceptible host, well, if your host is not susceptible, disease won't occur. You have to have a virulent, strong pathogen. Well, if the pathogen is not strong, it won't happen. If the pathogen is not even there, of course, disease won't happen. And then you have to have a favorable environment, favorable to the disease. And so if the environment is not favorable to the disease, it won't happen. So if any one of the 3 components is absent, you're not going to be sick. And that's because the tendency is to be healthy. If you don't have the negative effects, then you will be healthy. All right. So this is the picture I was talking about. Okay, so this is the environment, the 3 things. You need a susceptible host. That's the plant that gets sick. You have a virulent pathogen over here. That's the thing that's causing the disease. It has to be strong. And then you have to have a favorable environment for the plant to exist in so that the disease can grow. So it said also the severity of the interaction is going to determine how strong the disease is. Right now, we've got a pretty strong disease because these circles overlap. But look, in this one, the circles don't overlap. Okay, so you don't have what you need for disease to occur. Now, if you take a think, and it talked about, like I said, the severity, how severe the disease is. What if you take this one here, where you've got the disease happening, and you push the circles closer together so that that overlap is bigger? You're going to be sicker. The plant will be sicker. It's the same for humans too. I mean, humans' sickness is the same three things that you got to have. All right, so any kind of sickness, if you pull the circles apart, meaning they don't interact with one another, then you're not going to be sick, or you'll be less sick. The closer or the more the three interact, the more severe the case is. All right, so just think about that for a little while and talk back through it. The next part is antibiotic or not abiotic, or non-infectious diseases. Do you remember, like I said, in biology, when you learned the abiotic factors of the environment? That was the non-living stuff like water or air or minerals or rocks and sand, the stuff that's not living. Okay, so these are diseases that happen from non-living things. An abiotic plant disease is caused by non-living factors like environmental conditions or nutrient deficiencies, not pathogens. A pathogen is a living thing, and so there's no pathogens here. It's just something within the environment that's making that plant sick. They're not contagious, okay, because it's the environment. It's not some pathogen hopping from plant to plant to plant. So it's not contagious, but it can significantly impact plant health. Like if you're not giving them, if they're having a nutrient deficiency, then you know that's going to hurt the plant. It's not that it's contagious. Okay, it's just because this one plant is nitrogen deficient doesn't mean he's going to make the other plant nitrogen deficient. Okay, so examples include damage from the soil compaction. Soil compaction, salt or ice or sun, all of those will damage it, as well as nutritional problems. Those are abiotic and non-infectious diseases. Okay, here's some examples. Okay, this is frost injury on soybean seedlings. This is blossom end rot in tomatoes. It's caused by too much nitrogen in the fertilizer. And this is sun scorch on a dogwood tree. Dogwoods are shade. They're trees. They have to have sunlight, but they don't want direct full-on sunlight. They're an understory tree. That's what you call it. So this is sun scorch. It's been in too much sunlight, and the dogwood tree doesn't like it at all. All right, and so going on here, these next we have our biotic infections. These are the ones that are infectious. These are the ones that can hop from one to another to another. These are the biotic diseases. So the biotic plant diseases, they are caused by living organisms, some sort of bug or germ or virus. Okay, so they are known as pathogens. They are infectious, meaning they can spread from one plant to the next. The pathogens can affect any part of the plant tissues depending on what we're talking about, including the leaves, stems, or fruit. Leaves, stems, roots, or fruits. Any part of the plant can develop a biotic infection, depending on what type of pathogen we're thinking of. Here's some examples of infectious diseases. This is a soybean plants dying from a fungus. You don't need to know the name of it, but this fungus infection. This is a kidney bean plant showing bacteria leaf spot. So that's a bacterial infection right there. And this is impatiens, which is a little flower with necrotic spot virus. So this is a virus, and this is a bacteria. Okay, this one is bacteria. This one is a virus. Do you see how they look very similar? So you have to know exactly what you're dealing with in order to know how to treat it, because you're definitely going to treat a bacterial disease different than you would treat a viral disease. And fungus, they dry up and they look just really sad. So you have to know what you're treating. So some of the things we'll talk about, I'm not going to expect you to, at least not in this section at all. I have to check the other sections, but I don't think so. I don't think you'll need to list what disease you're looking at, but you have to know that because of the different diseases, you're going to use different treatments. All right, so the plant pathogens, again, it's some living thing. This again, we're still talking biotic. Everything is, the plant pathogens are living, and it is contagious from one plant to the next. The plant pathogens are similar to human pathogens in animals because that's the cause, because they are organisms that cause infectious diseases. We use the same word when we're talking about humans, and the same word when we're talking about animals, and the same word when we're talking about plants. So it's pathogen just means anything that makes you sick. And then the pathogens include, where's my mouse this time? There it is. Okay, funguses, bacteria, viruses, nematodes, which I'll tell you what they are, and parasitic plants. Okay, so those are 5 pathogens that can make your plants sick. Okay, the pathogens are going to require mechanisms to spread between the hosts for survival. Okay, so if they can't figure out how to spread from one plant to the next, they're going to die. That's how they reproduce, and that's how they extend their own life. All right, so they have to have some sort of mechanism to move from one host to the next. And if we can understand the transmission, if we can understand how they're moving from one plant to the next, we can prevent these diseases. Okay, so the pathogens require some sort of mechanisms to allow them to move between hosts from one plant to the next. And if we can figure out how they're moving, we can make them stop. All right, so the pathogens, though, often evolve faster than their hosts, which gives them an evolutionary advantage. If you think about how quickly a bacteria reproduces itself compared to how quickly a tree reproduces itself, all right, so bacteria is going to be having evolution crazy much faster than a tree would. All right, the bacteria is going to be changing and modifying and mutating and doing all sorts of crap. By the time the tree has time for the next generation to see if it's going to evolve, it takes forever. So the pathogens are evolving faster, which gives them an evolutionary advantage. All right, so we said that there's a whole bunch of different types. There was funguses, bacteria, viruses, parasitic. There were 5 of them. We're talking right now about funguses. Ugh, funguses. Funguses and fungal-like organisms flow. Fungal-like organism. It's not officially a fungus, but it's close enough. All right, so fungus and fungal-like organisms are the most common cause of plant disease. Because funguses don't have chlorophyll, they can't make their own food. Okay, that's why they're trying to get it off the plant. Funguses don't have chlorophyll. They can't make their own food. And they reproduce with spores. Spores are tiny, tiny, tiny little. It's not a seed, but it has the same job as a seed, but they are tiny and usually airborne. So once a fungus gets hold of something and it produces its spores, those spores being airborne, it's real easy for them to go to the next plant. And they also can survive in soil or plant debris, meaning dead leaves from the previous year. So that stuff when you plant the next year, there may already be soil spores, fungus spores in the soil. All right, and you plant it in it, and you wind up uh, perpetuating that with the next season. Though some of them require warmer climates. So if they require warm climates, and they'll spread for air currents. Okay, if they can handle cold climates, they're going to sit there in the soil all winter. You see the difference? Okay, if they can survive in soil or plant debris, if they can survive cold, or like here, because like I said, it doesn't get that cold. In the warmer climates, they can also spread by air currents. Monitoring their movement is important for disease management. If you know that they're fixing to put on spores and perpetuate, if they're putting out spores and they're going to reproduce, if you can catch them before they make the spores and destroy them before they make the spores, then they're not going to be able to transmit to the next generation. These are some funguses. Now, like I said, funguses are pretty gross. So these are soybeans dying from that sclerotina fungus. Remember, we saw the far back picture of the soybeans dying. This is that same soybeans we were looking at earlier. Remember, they were all dry and gross looking. Well, this is a close-up picture of that same thing. This is called black or stem rust. See, looks like rust. Okay, but it's a fungus on wheat. And then this is corn smut. Oh my God, do you see how disgusting that looks? But those are all fungus infections. All right, now these are bacteria infections. Okay, the bacteria are single-celled organisms. They can cause plant diseases by entering through wounds. If you have say there was a storm and a branch fell off a tree, if that area where the branch fell off the tree, if the bark is raw, then the bacteria can get into that wound. Okay, or even natural openings. They're small enough to get in. Mouse, come on, would you work with me? Natural openings. You know how the leaves have a stomata at the bottom to let gas exchange go through? It's possible these bacteria are small enough just to get in through the stomata of the leaf, and it wasn't anybody's fault. And then they're going to reproduce through binary fission. That just means they split themselves in half. They just copy and split, copy and split, copy and split. Binary fission. And they can, again, survive by overwintering through the soil. Overwintering. like overwinter, meaning if they overwinter in the soil, when you plant the next spring's crop, the bacteria may still already be there. They could also be in the plant debris, the leftover grasses and leaves, or they could have insect vectors. Now, insect vectors means they have host carriers. So let's say there's a mosquito that has a bacteria in its gut. Well, mosquitoes don't bite plants. Let's go with a caterpillar. Okay, say there's a caterpillar that has a bacteria in its gut. Caterpillar eats some of the leaves, and then the bacteria from its gut, when it poops, okay, on that leaf, then the bacteria is on the plant. Okay, and the caterpillar just ate a hole in the plant, all right, because he was eating some of the plant. So now there's a wound in the leaf, and when that caterpillar poops, the bacteria that's in its poop can now get into the leaf. Okay, that makes the caterpillar a vector. Okay, the caterpillar might not even be sick from that bacteria. He's just carrying it around. All right, that's what a vector is, a host carrier. Okay, he may not even be sick. He's just carrying that thing around, making everybody else sick. Okay, all right. So here's some bacteria pictures. This is bacterial blight. I think down here it's harder to see. Bacterial blight on this soybean. This is apple fire blight. This is an apple tree. All right, and this. Okay, the bush is called a burning bush. It's not actually on fire, and Moses isn't anywhere around. All right, but this is a burning bush, and this is called crown gall. Okay, which is actually pretty interesting. My daughter is studying genetics, and she's talking about how they use bacteria for genetic manipulation. Okay, and they can do it for GMO type crop stuff. The bacteria that grows in this crown gall, they can actually manipulate this bacteria, grow this on purpose, and then use it to change the plant's DNA. So anyway, this is a disease. But we are smart enough that we can actually use that disease to forward our own agendas with genetic modification. We can, but it's still. This is molecules. Now, I had never heard of molecules before. See the word cute? It looks like a little cute little molecule. No, that's not what it is. It is almost exactly like a bacteria, except that it doesn't have a wall, a cell wall around the bacteria. The thing about it is a lot of our, they use antibiotics to kill bacteria, right? That's what it's for. Antibiotics kill bacteria. What most of the antibiotics do is they break down the cell wall on a bacteria. And once they break down the cell wall, they've killed the bacteria. Well, these molecules don't even have a cell wall. They are perfectly fine living their life without a cell wall. So any of the antibiotics that we're using to try to kill them by destroying their cell wall is not going to work on them. All right, so that's why it's it's important enough to be its own little category, because we can't develop a lot of, see where it says down here at the bottom, control is very difficult. We can't develop good antibiotics that will, because they don't have a cell wall. Our antibiotics break down the cell wall, and they don't have one. And so so you don't really need to know. Let me go make sure I get everything on here. Start back at the beginning again. So you don't need to know these kind, I don't believe. Okay, these have a filament. Have you seen, it's like a bacteria cell. It has a tail. Okay, and this spiroplasma is helical, which means, you know how the DNA twists up like a ladder? That's what that means. So some of them have tails. That's the filamentous ones. Some of them are helical. They spin like the DNA does. Okay, but again, I don't think that's incredibly important, but those are just two types of molecules. And again, a molecule is just like a bacteria, but it doesn't have a cell wall. And because it doesn't have a cell wall, the crap we get to try to kill bacteria isn't going to kill it. Okay, these pathogens rely on insect vectors for transmission, like we just talked about with the caterpillar and the bacteria. Well, this is just like a bacteria. They all need insect vectors to make them work, probably because they don't have a cell wall and the environment, they couldn't survive the environment without a host. But control for these guys is very, very difficult. And the current methods we have negative environmental and health impacts. If you imagine we're trying to kill something unkillable, we're going to make a big mess if we do it. We are going to damage some serious environment when we're trying to kill something basically unkillable. All right, so we just need more research, and we need to figure out what we need to do for this. And next slide. Next slide. Okay, hang on. I'm trying to switch slides. Just a second. And so this is some examples of the damage by the molecules. And again, molecules is just basically a subtype of bacteria that does not have a cell wall. This is in a magnolia tree. Okay, and this is in a tomato stem. And this is on a lime. Ew, it's pretty gross. Okay, this is called a citrus canker. Okay, that's what that's called, and it's caused by a molecule. I don't know what this is called, but it's in the tomato stem, and I don't know what they call this either, but it's on a magnet. Yeah, you got this. These are some of the molecules, and again, try to remember the difference between a bacteria and a molecule. That may come up and may be important. Bacteria have cell walls, therefore, when we make an antibiotic, it destroys the cell wall and kills it. Molecules do not have a cell wall to begin with, so any medicine we have trying to kill the cell wall isn't going to work on them. They don't have one, but because they don't have a cell wall, they are sent through insect vectors exclusively, only through insect vectors. I think we got that. All right, now viruses and viroids, and again, this is viroids. Do you hear how it means sort of like a virus? Just like we had bacteria and molecules. Okay, we have viruses and viroids. They are both intracellular pathogens. They're going to go inside cells. Viruses have a protein coat, and again, we're talking about a capsule or not a capsule, right? So the viruses have a protein coat, and the viruses are similar, but they don't have the coat. Okay, so just like the bacteria had a cell wall and the molecules didn't, the viruses have a protein coat, and the viroids don't. So basically the same concept. But they primarily spread, again, both of them are going to spread through insects, nematodes, and funguses. And they can be transmitted via the seeds. So the viruses can get in the seed, even if it doesn't affect the seed, but it can affect the growing plant later. It can get through vegetative propagation, and it can get through, if you are pruning, you can put viruses into your tree with your pruning, especially if the virus is on the clippers. All right, here's some viruses. This is a tobacco mosaic virus. This is a Citrus excortus viroid on a fruit tree. And this is potato spindle tuber viroid, PSTV. They've got this one initialed with its own little name because I believe this is the one that caused the potato famine in Ireland, I believe. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure this is the virus that caused the potato famine in the 1800s. It was really big. If you look up potato famine in Ireland, it was a huge deal. If you don't already know what it is, it was big deal. All right. So nematodes. Now that's the funnest word in the world. Nematode. All right. They're little worm. I wonder why I don't have a picture on here. Little wormy things. All right. They're just little worms. So anyway, the nematodes are microscopic worm-like animals. They live in the soil and move with the soil, but some are transmitted by insects. Like I said, if you can get in the gut of an insect, the insects will bring you around to wherever you go. And they are mostly going to affect the above-ground plant parts, the stems and such. Roots a little bit, but not much. Mostly it's the above-ground stuff. And I've got some examples of the nematodes on the next slide. See, they said it was above ground, but right here we've got some right in the roots. Okay, this is not root knot nematodes. That should be an N, guys. That should be an N. Nematodes. All right, and see that's one of them sitting there. See, a little microscopic worm thing. And this one, because he's sitting next to a bacteria. Do you see how small he is? All right, so this is a cyst nematode making these little bubbly blister things. And this is on a carrot. Now, this doesn't even look like a carrot, but it is. It's a carrot. And this root lesion nematode, see, do you see him sitting in here in the roots? All right. And he caused this mess on this carrot. Again, it's these worms. All right, the next type of pathogen is a parasitic high plant. Parasitic high plant, okay, meaning it's usually up high in the tree. All right, and it's a parasite. The parasite, it is a plant, okay, like mistletoe and dodder. They do have chlorophyll, but for some reason they can't make their own food. They've got chlorophyll, but they can't do photosynthesis. I don't know what that's about. They just don't work. And so they get their nutrients and water by parasitizing other plants. They're going to suck it off the tree that they live in. Let me show you. All right, this is dodder. Okay, this back here is like a tumbleweed. You've ever seen tumbleweeds in the desert? Okay, this is dodder living on it. Okay, and it's sucking the juices, the nutrients out of that bush because he can't make his own. And here's another one. This is mistletoe. You know the mistletoe that we have at Christmas? It's actually a parasite, and it's poisonous. It's a monster thing. Mistletoe is actually very, very poisonous, but we use it at Christmas anyway. But it is a parasitic part of a tree. Um, and it grows. This is a poplar tree that it's growing on, and it can cause root rot, and cankers. Okay, it's going to suck the nutrients right out of the tree so it can live on itself. And it's huge. Those get really, really big. Uh, Rafflesia is a parasitic plant known for its giant stinky flowers. They are real stinky because the pollinators for this plant are flies. Okay, flies, not butterflies, not bees, flies, buzzing, nasty flies. And so this flower smells like poop on purpose. The flower smells like poop so it can draw flies as its pollinator. It's the most disgusting thing in the world. But it's another parasitic plant. It's going to damage the host vines by absorbing nutrients and water out of the vine that it's trying to grow off of. They're pretty to look at, but you don't want to see them in person. No, man. They stink. Oh, it's awful. All right. So now we're going to talk about we've done talking about the pathogens and the types of pathogens. Now we're going to focus on the disease cycle, and it has 6 steps. Okay. We start off with inoculation. Have you ever heard when somebody gets a vaccine, especially with the little kids, they call it inoculation? That's the introduction. Okay. Now, and when you're talking about vaccines, it's a good thing. All right. But but the word inoculation means you're just putting something in. Okay. And you can use it to discuss vaccines, which is a good thing, or you can use it to discuss pathogens, which is a bad thing. The inoculation part just means going in. Okay, you can have something good going in or something bad going in. If it's something good going in, that's our vaccines. If something bad going in, that's our pathogens. Either way, it's called inoculation. That just means going in. All right, then you have penetration. You have to get into the host. Okay, then infection, where you have establishment. I'm going to go over the more details for these in just a second for you. Then incubation, which is a latent period. Then reproduction and survival. All right, and again, I'm going over the details of these in just a second for me. And these cycles can be monocyclic or polycyclic. Now that sounds just ridiculous, and your book didn't go to a lot of detail of it, but you take the words apart. Monocyclic, one cycle. It goes step 1 through 6, and then it starts over. Or polycyclic, it can hit any one of these parts of the cycle, start anywhere, go anywhere, and hop from one portion to the other, depending on what pathogen we're talking about. So that's all that means. Monocyclic means you take the steps 1 through 6 in a row. Polycyclic means you can jumble them up a little bit. Let's see. And let me change the slide. Take these steps and break them down a little bit. Again, inoculation just means going in. It's the initial introduction of the pathogen to the plant host. Different pathogens are going to use different various methods, like airborne spores for the funguses to initiate the infection. Different pathogens go different ways. Penetration is how the pathogen enters the plant. And so some of the pathogens are going to exploit existing wounds or natural openings like the stomata. So this just means how do you get in, while others like funguses and nematodes can directly penetrate tissues under favorable conditions. They can actually eat their way in. All right, and then you have the infection part of it. It is the establishment of the parasitic relationship between the pathogen and the plant. So the infection is how the parasite starts to build up and starts to eat off the plant and starts to live and invade the other plant tissues. The pathogens like viruses and bacteria and phytoplasmas. That was the molecules. Okay, so I didn't remember what we said phytoplasmas were. That's the molecules that can't directly penetrate are going to rely on vectors. You remember vector is a host like an insect for the inoculation and spread. So if they can't get in on their own, then they're going to get an insect to bring it in. Now the last 3 steps, incubation, meaning once it's in there, okay, the pathogen enters the plant, it's going to remain latent, like just chilling out, building up and building up before the disease actually starts. Okay, that's what incubation means. And then you have the reproduction, where the plant pathogens reproduce either sexually or asexually, depending on what we're talking about. But this is where they're getting ready to spread this infection to the other plants. Like I said, these are all biotic diseases, right? These are all living diseases, and they all want to keep living. All right, so you have to do this reproduction thing. And so this portion is where they're getting ready to spread into other plants. And then they have survival. The plant pathogens had developed diverse survival mechanisms to endure unfavorable conditions. Like even if you are trying to kill this disease, they might still make it. survival is a big thing. So some of the examples include the dark colored spores for fungi for UV protection. The sun can kill most of these funguses and diseases and stuff, just ultraviolet light from the sun. But that's why the plants will make a lot of these dark colored spots so that the sun can't bother them. Okay, and then also protective cuticle casings, meaning remember we talked about the viruses. Some of them had cases, and the bacteria, some of them had cases. That helps to protect them. And then you also put them around the nematode eggs so that they can survive from transferring from one plant to the next. If you can disrupt any stage in this disease cycle, it's going to hinder development. So if you can break this thing up at any one of the 6 steps, you're going to make these cycles crucial for effective disease management. Okay. All right. Now here's our summary. Again, we're just about done with section 1. It didn't take too long, I don't think. And so, so this is we got a comprehensive. So I'm trying to go too fast. There's just 2 slides on this summary, and then I'm probably going to break the video and pick up 8.2 separately. So let's finish 8.1. So this is our summary. We started off with the disease triangle. Try to remember that picture with the Venn diagram. It requires three factors. You have the susceptible host, the virulent, meaning strong, pathogen, and a favorable environment. So it's the interaction of these factors determines the severity of the disease. Okay, how much overlap you have between these. All right, and then we talked about biotic versus abiotic diseases. Biotic is what we talked about, most of them, caused by living organisms or pathogens, and they are infectious, meaning they can go from one plant to the next. The abiotic diseases are caused by non-living factors like nutrient deficiencies or environmental stress, and they are not infectious. You're not going to automatically transfer one to the other just because this plant didn't get enough water. Doesn't mean it's going to make the other plant sick. But the bacterial, the biotic types, these are the ones that do transfer, and they use the pathogens to transfer from one to the other. Pathogens are disease carriers. So the pathogens could be fungus, bacteria, molecules. And remember, the difference in this is bacteria have a cell wall, molecules don't have a cell wall. And that's why the molecules are harder to kill, because all our antibiotics are designed to break the cell wall, and they already don't have one. And then viruses and viroids, we talked about those two. We've got them listed as a single thing right here, but again, it's the protein coat. And then we had the nematodes, the little worms, and the parasitic plants. These are the plants that they have chlorophyll, most of them, but they can't do photosynthesis, and so they have to eat off the other plants. And so we're discussing the respective modes of infection and survival, so how they spread from one another, which I just told you about. And here's the last part of it. These are the 6 steps of the disease cycle. You had inoculation, where there it is. Inoculation is the introduction of the pathogen into the host, means going in. Penetration, it has to find entry to the host. And then infection is where it establishes a relationship. It starts to build up and starts to eat off the host. You have this infection happening. The parasite is starting to feed itself. All right, and then you have this incubation period where you have this time of latency. Latency means kind of laying around, nothing really happening before the disease symptoms appears, because the pathogen doesn't really want you to get sick until it's ready to reproduce. Because if you get sick too soon and you cure yourself too soon, he doesn't have a chance to reproduce. So you have this incubation period that gives him a minute to set up his reproduction that he needs to do before you even get sick, so that they have a chance to get finished, and then they spread it to the other plants, and then they can survive. The pathogen is persisting even if the conditions are unfavorable, they are still doing what they can to survive. So with disease control, this understanding the disease cycle is crucial for effective disease management, because disrupting any stage of this can prevent or reduce severity. So understanding how the disease cycle works and knowing where to break it up means we can keep our plants healthier. All right, and I'm going to stop the video here, and I'm going to do 8.2 separately. All right, y'all, see you in a minute.